Aber das ist was Persönliches.
Hey there beautiful human, my name is RidersDX and welcome to my channel where today we're going to be talking even more about the Sonic movie. Yes, I love this topic. This topic has been really fun to talk about actually. Like I know a lot of fans have been going absolutely crazy and really dramatic over this movie, but I've just been enjoying the discussion that this has been conjuring up, and of course I've been enjoying the extra traffic that's been coming to my channel recently. So thank you all so much for your support recently. It's really amazing just how much my channel has been blowing up since this movie was reviewed. I'm really appreciative to all of you for coming to watch my videos and engaging in this discussion with me. Now before I get started with this video, I do know that there was a new concept art of this movie that was released recently or leaked. I don't know if it was official. I don't think it was official actually. Apparently it's a concept art from a year ago while the film was still being worked up, and it has Chris Pratt in it, which makes me really excited because I love Chris Pratt, and Sonic also in what seems to be an earlier design, because it definitely looks a little bit different from the current design right now. And I'm not going to talk about it right now because that's not what this video is about, but at the end of the video I will touch upon what I think about this design. So if you're interested in hearing what I think about the design, then stick to the end of the video, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit about what I think about the design. But anyway, let's get back to the main topic of this video. So I've had an interesting thought about this movie ever since I saw it reviewed and saw all the social media reactions on the day of, and that's Sega's stance in this movie. So about 80 to 90% of people that have seen this poster don't like it. And I know I'm in that minority that is pretty mixed on it and actually doesn't really feel strongly about it either way, but the clear majority of people looking at this poster do in fact hate it. And this actually includes some people that are very much involved with Sega. So we first kind of realized that Sega wasn't entirely approving of this design in the IGN article, which I did talk about in my first video on the Sonic movie. Well, not my first video, but my first video on the Sonic movie design, which you can check out in the top right corner. But if you're watching this, then you've probably already seen that video. So yeah. So I think it was Tim Moeller that was interviewed in the article, but I think it was Tim that said that Sega wasn't entirely approving of the eyes. So we could tell from that comment that Sega wasn't really approving of maybe not just the eyes, but a lot of other things with the design as well. Because honestly, I think if Sega was on board with this design, then the directors would not have said anything about it in the interview. If it really was a good collaboration between the two different parties, then that comment would have not been made. So, you know, with interviews, there's always a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes that we don't actually get to see when the interview comes out. So I'm sure there was a little bit more elaboration on what that disagreement was exactly, and maybe we'll find out more of that as time goes on. But that was the first sign that Sega was not very keen on certain aspects of the design. And later on as the week would go on, there was other signs of Sega not fully supporting the Sonic movie design. So one thing I want to point out is what they did on the Sonic the Hedgehog Twitter account. So on the day of the announcement of the movie, the Sonic Twitter tweeted out that IGN was going to be reviewing the design for the very first time. But after that, the Twitter was completely silent. The Twitter said absolutely nothing about the movie to this point ever since that tweet. They didn't even retweet like IGN's announcement tweet, which is kind of something that most franchise accounts would do if their franchise was getting a live action movie and if the announcement had happened that day. I think the least that the account could have done was retweet the design, but nope, the account did absolutely nothing. They did absolutely nothing. And what's really funny is that a few days later, we got the review of Sand Road from Team Sonic Racing, and the account tweeted out that song. And I just think it's kind of weird that they tweeted out a song from Team Sonic Racing on the week that the movie design was reviewed for the first time. It's almost like Sega is trying to distract us from the news of the movie, because I don't know, in my personal opinion, like I'm not like a PR guy or anything like that, but I think it'd make more sense to try to space out what you talk about on your Twitter more in terms of Sonic. You had this huge announcement about the Sonic movie this week. Why did you decide to review a track from Team Sonic Racing during the same week? Doesn't really make much sense unless you think about the fact that they're probably trying to distract fans from the movie. So that's even further evidence that Sega is not on board with this design. I mean, this is very speculative, but it is very suspicious that they would release this track this week. And also, if you go to the Twitter of Aaron Weber is one of the PR guys of Sonic. He actually tweeted out something this week that said that the little surprise that they were referring to earlier that was going to be revealed in December does not pertain to the movie. Like, they first said it didn't pertain to the games, and now they said it's not pertaining to the movie. But it is very interesting that Aaron Weber said that it wasn't going to be pertaining to the movie. It's almost as if he wanted to reassure fans that this surprise wasn't what they were talking about, because he knew that a lot of fans were disappointed with the design. So these are just really weird things that Sega is doing all around, and it's kind of showing that Paramount and Sega are not unified when it comes to this movie. There's definitely been some disagreements, I think, behind the scenes. So a lot of people have been commenting on my video, and I have been reading the comments. I mean, I haven't been replying to them, unfortunately, because it's just such an overwhelming amount of comments that it'd be impossible for me to get to them. But I have been reading them at least, and I know that there's some people that said that like Sega should not be to blame for this design. In fact, they don't like it. So some people are actually praising Sega for not liking the design and trying to stand up for the license. But I'm going to tell you why, in this circumstance, why you really should be putting the heat on Sega. Who owns the Sonic license? I'll give you a few seconds to answer that in your head. Sega. Sega owns the Sonic license. So Sega is supposed to have the final say in what Sonic is supposed to look like in this movie and what Paramount does in terms of the casting, the writing, the scripting, the storyline, etc, etc. Sega, in a perfect world, is supposed to have the final say in all of this because they own the license. But it's clear to me that Sega messed up somewhere, because this design came out and Sega has not been rallying behind it. They have not been in support of it. They've not shown an ounce of support for it. In fact, they pretty much tried to ignore that the movie exists. But this is really, really not okay in my opinion. What I think happened is that Sega probably signed some contract that allowed Paramount to do what they wanted to do with the movie, and as a result, we're getting the movie that you all are seeing right now. And Sega is basically powerless in trying to change it because they probably signed some BS contract that gives Paramount all the power over this movie. And I'm just thinking, why would Sega do that? And I can't imagine a scenario where Sega didn't do that, because if they didn't do that, then they would have had a say in this design and they would have had it changed to the way that they wanted it to be changed. Because we know for a fact that Sega had some disagreements over the design, specifically the eye. So we know for a fact that Paramount and Sega are not seeing eye to eye in this situation. We also got evidence when one of the social media people from Sega, and I think her name was like Emmy, I don't remember what her last name was, but I'll show her tweet over here. She said that Sega was not entirely approving of the design either. It's clear that Sega did not approve of this design, but yet it's happening. So why is it happening? The reason it's happening is because Sega was probably really careless in the contract that they signed. You see all these different franchises that are turned from like books, TV shows, games into full-fledged films. I mean, I actually watched this video the other week about how Harry Potter could have been like a Nintendo franchise, but J.K. Rowling was very selective in who was going to be producing the Harry Potter movies and who was going to be producing the Harry Potter games, and she ultimately decided to go with Electronic Arts because she wanted the games to be accessible to as wide of an audience as possible. And in this video, it talked a lot about how J.K. Rowling was very, very selective in who was going to be directing and producing the films, and she had a lot of input into how the movie was gonna go. And I'm just thinking, why is Sega not in the same situation with the Sonic movie? It's clear that they have some reservations against the design, so why are these reservations being completely ignored? I mean, I'm not gonna let Paramount off easy either. I mean, I think it is kind of that Paramount doesn't really seem to care what Sega is thinking, or for the fact of that matter, what 90% of fans are thinking about the design. But Paramount has the right to do this, you see. I know for people that don't like the design, this is not what you want to hear, but Paramount has the right to do this because clearly whatever contract Sega and Paramount conjured up together, it gave Paramount the right to do all these things to Sonic in their movie. And this is really Sega's fault. It's Sega's fault. Sega should really be looking at themselves as to why they were so careless with their IP. And this is not something that's new for Sega. Sega has obviously been very careless with Sonic in the past, and it continues to happen. Now, in terms of the actual design, I don't really have a big problem with it. Like I said before, I'm very open-minded to it, and I'm really going to be looking forward to seeing how the movie comes to be. But my point here with this video is that obviously Sega has a lot of reservations with the movie because it's been confirmed that they had disagreements over the design, and two, Sega is being very silent when it comes to the movie on all their social media accounts. So obviously Sega is not for this design, but Sega is supposed to have the final say in what the design is supposed to be. They're supposed to have a final say in the movie itself. I mean, if they signed an appropriate contract, that's what should have happened. But clearly Sega did not sign the appropriate contract. They were probably just really careless about what this studio was going to be doing with Sonic, and that's just a real shame, you know, because if you look at like Detective Pikachu, and I hate doing comparisons because, you know, it kind of stirs up a lot of like crap, but if you look at Detective Pikachu, you can see how much care there was in bringing all those Pokemon into the real life setting. You can see that Pikachu, although he looks realistic, is still stuck very closely to the original design of Pikachu. And you can't say the same for Sonic, and that's probably because Nintendo basically took out the whip and made sure that Warner Brothers was gonna stick as faithful to the original design as possible. Who knows what else they were thinking of doing with Pikachu, but obviously Nintendo had the final say and made sure that Detective Pikachu was the film that they wanted to see in theaters. But you can't say the same for the Sonic movie, because clearly Sega has some reservations, but they have no power over it, so they basically resorted to trying to ignore the movie and actually go as far as try to distract people from the movie. And you know what? It's going to be a very uphill battle for them if they're going to do that, because I'm very sure that Paramount's going to go all out with the promotional campaign. Movie campaigns are always humongous, and it's hard to speak above them, especially for Sega, who themselves have been struggling with promoting like Team Sonic Racing, for example. Like, that promotional campaign has been kind of underwhelming. So I can only imagine how hard it's going to be for them to ignore the Sonic movie, especially when it's close to coming out. But I digress. This is the situation that Sega put themselves in, and yet again they've shown another example of being careless with Sonic. And I think that's what, if there's anything about this thing, about this whole situation that makes me really mad, it's that. Because if you have issues with the design, why don't you have the power to say no to it and make changes to it? Because you signed a dumb contract and you didn't look through it properly. You didn't care about it enough. You didn't care about your IP enough to make sure something like this couldn't happen. But now we've got the Sonic movie. We got a Sonic movie that it's clear as day that Sega is not happy with. And yeah, this is the world that we live in right now. We live in a world where Sega still hasn't learned that they need to take really good care of their IP when they're outsourcing it to other companies. And it's not like Sega hasn't done this before. Sega has outsourced Sonic to other companies before, but Sega in those situations were actually a little bit more careful in terms of what the other company was doing. Like, if you look at some of the earlier concept arcs of Sonic Boom, you could see that Sonic was originally going to look a lot more different than he does right now, but Sega took out the whip. I just love that phrase, took out the whip. And made sure that Sonic still looked as faithful as he could to the original Sonic while still having his own flair. I just don't understand why they couldn't do the same thing with the movie, especially because the movie was going to have such a big impact on the Sonic franchise. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think this movie's going to kill Sonic. It honestly might leave a really big scar in terms of a lot of fans' eyes, but it's not going to kill Sonic because Sonic's primarily a video game franchise, and as long as this isn't a video game, I think we're good, honestly. Most video game movies suck anyway, so people are not going to be surprised if this movie actually does end up being really bad. So it's not really going to have as huge of an impact on Sonic as people might be exaggerating it to be. However, I think it's just really disappointing that Sega doesn't have more control over their IP. And the reason they don't have that control is because they were just really careless with what they were doing with it. And they've always been careless with Sonic. And it's just really disappointing to see that Sega still hasn't learned from the past. And that's why I think people should be putting the heat on Sega, because Sega is supposed to have the final say in what's going on with this movie, and clearly they don't have that final say, and that's really disappointing. It's really disappointing that they put themselves in a situation where an outside company is doing something with Sonic that they're not happy about, and the fans are not happy about. Well, most fans. I know that there's some people, especially on my channel, that like the design, and definitely good for you if you like the design. I'm a little bit more mixed on it. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not I like it, but yeah. It's just such a shame that Sega has a problem with the design, but they can't do anything about it. It's just really sad, and it's really disappointing to see that Sega put themselves in this situation, but is nothing new, so that's just how it is. But let me know in the comment section below what you think about this. Do you think that Sega should be put at fault for this, or do you think that Sega is not all to blame for this situation? Let me know in the comment section below. So before I sign off, let me give you all a quick 2 cents about what I think about this concept art that was leaked for the Sonic movie. I actually really like it. And it's I think Sonic looks really cute. He looks adorable. I mean, he still looks a little bit different from what we're used to, but I think it actually looks different in a good way. Like, he almost kind of reminds me of like a pet, and he looks adorable to me. I don't know about other people, but I think this design is pretty good, and I'd be fine with it if this was the movie design. But I do know that this is not going to be the final design, because clearly Sonic doesn't have the legs that we've been seeing in the movie posters. He doesn't have that muscular body. He has different shoes here also. So from what it looks like, I think they made the design a little bit worse than this one. I really wish that they went with this one at least. I mean, I would have appreciated it if they made it more similar to the video game design, but at the same time, I don't think this one is that bad. Sonic looks pretty cool. He reminds me a lot of how he looked like in the classic days, especially with Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, just the way that he's posed, it really reminds me of the energy of the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog iteration of Sonic. And Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog is low-key one of my favorite Sonic shows, and it's not something I'd like to admit because the show is kind of dumb, but I love it anyway, so this makes me feel really good. But I do know that this is not the final design, and I kind of wish they would just review the final design already. I mean, I don't see what the point is at this point to keep it going, but yeah, that's just me. But yeah, I like the design, but let me know in the comment section what you think about the design. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to my channel, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at RidersDX, or join my Discord server, the Spongy Garden. And yes, thanks for watching my channel, by the way. I'm really appreciative of you watching my videos, especially if you've been watching to this point. I'll catch y'all next time. Riders is out.